stay fly, stay fly.
I challenged my son to do something, and he had flaked out on me. And I pushed him, just like my father pushed me. And, she told the cops, or the police, the courts, that I was abusing him. You know why they call the projects a project? Because it's a project. This system is not broken. This is the way the system operates. Until we chant down Babylon, nothing will change. We can pray, we can march, we can wish, we can try to play get-along game.
Hey, this is Seiko, Fly Guys, Seiko from the Fly Guys podcast. There are times when I interview people that I really don't necessarily agree with, or I don't agree with all of their positions. This is one of those times. But enjoy the ride.
Stay fly, stay fly. You're listening to The Fly Guy Show. They do everything on the fly and in such a fly manner. Stay fly, stay fly, stay fly, stay fly.
All that party. The views expressed on The Fly Guy podcast by the guests of The Fly Guy podcast are only the views of the guests, unless we say we agree. Unless explicitly stated.
Hey, this is Ernie Thomas here on the Bold School Podcast. You're listening to Psycho Vonner's Fly Guy Podcast. Support, like, subscribe, and share. He's saying some good things. Share it. Don't keep it to yourself.
3, 2, 1. It's your man DJ Seiko for another episode of the Fly Guys Podcast. We have a whole host of fly fathers on the pod tonight. Dan Trez, marvelous and a miserable experience.
A marvelous moment that I had was last year when Black Panther came out. We did a screening for Black Panther for my community. But what was dope was we did an event where we had all these black martial artists meet, and we did everybody did a demo, and then we had like a panel discussion, and then we did a workshop. And my sons, they do wushu, so that's the first time me and my sons performed on stage. We weren't together, but we was on the same stage, so that was like a really proud moment.
Right.
It was like all the black martial artists in Dayton, Ohio, and people came from all over. It was a dope turnout. It was free. The screening was free. Like it was really dope. I was looking at the pictures of it the other day, and I was just like, man, that was like very historical, and it was a really marvelous moment for us. And then, of course, the most miserable, I talked about it last week when my oldest had cancer. That was like a really tough period.
Yo, so Crumb, man, a marvelous and a miserable experience.
Marvelous experience. I remember one time I was pushing my son and he broke down crying, and I kind of just, use myself as a barometer. Anytime my parents would have pushed me, or anybody for that matter, and I started to cry, I was like, okay, you've reached that point where you can go no further. And he started crying, so I just kind of let up on him. I'm like, all right, well, we'll live to fight another day. And even at his weakest moment, he was like, no, I'm not done. And at that particular point, I realized that was a man I was dealing with. He made me proud that day to where he was at his lowest point and still wouldn't give up. I'm like, dag, I wish I had some of that. That was marvelous. Miserable. I remember one time me and the kids was out, having a great time, and his mother says to me, I'm so proud of you. And, giving me glory and so on and so forth. But after a while, I realized she was comparing me to the lowest of the low. And, I told her, I said, I don't take pride in being compared to the deadbeat dads. Compare me to an Obama, compare me to a Mandela. Don't compare me to the junkie across the street and then give me accolades based off that. So, I was a little bit discouraged based on, like, okay, the standard is not deadbeat dad. So to see a man with his child should not be a shocker. That was really something that bothered me in terms of a miserable moment in fatherhood.
Question, was it a white woman?
I can't really remember what the woman looked like, but it just, in hindsight, I'm like, hold on. The only reason she was impressed is because, she's operating based off the assumption that, the majority of our men are no good.
Or absent. And
right. Like, come on, man. Stop the cliche stereotypes.
Like, really? We gonna do that today?
Wow. Chef Ponder, man, tell us about a marvelous and a miserable experience you've had as a father.
I would say a marvelous experience would be the time I got to see my son born. We just had pulled out for deployment, and he was due like weeks after we had pulled out, and the admiral came in there in the kitchen and asked me if I wanted to go home and see that happen. And I flew back, and the day I landed was the day he was born. Like it all worked out perfectly. See that? So that was one of the most, I think, proud moments. I would say a miserable moment when I was out without a job for a while, and I had to take a job down in Hawaii for a 5-month contract, and being away from my kids that long was pretty miserable. But I had to go do what I had to do, for the money situation. And it just really sucked. I had to go do that. There was like no other option. So those are my two.
Wow. Ed, we had a horrible connection earlier. Can you give yours again?
Oh, well, I said my most miserable was ushering them through middle school. Because I was teaching middle school, I was like, I can't have the same kind of urchin in my house. I said, I can't teach them during the day and then have them at home. And it was that moment of, look, if you act as bad as they do, you're going to die. You're really going to die. But I think the most remarkable moment as a father is watching your kids get it. I know for me as an educator, to see my kids doing well and to see them get it and to actually have them verbalize to me. And in those moments where they're verbalizing, you know what? You were right. And to give you your glory while you can give you your roses while you can smell them, and just to watch my kids just succeed and keep pushing and watching I guess for me, that work ethic, the same work ethic my father gave me, in watching them, like I said, and actually the proudest moment for me is watching my son be a father to his son.
Wow.
It is. It's the most amazing thing to me ever. And to have that little sucker call, hey, Papa, where? He always wants to know where the damn dog is, but he can't call me Grandpa. I'm not here for that, any of that. But
good stuff. At the end of our conversation last week, Dan Trez-Omi and Brother Crumb here started a nice conversation dealing with fixing some of the problems we're having in fatherhood. And, Dan Trez-Omi was saying things like, we need to step up, we need to be involved. And Crumb was saying, we can't step up, we don't have stairs. There's some structural things, there's some systematic things that are in place. And I wanted to really continue that conversation right now. So why don't we start off with you, Crumb, because I know you had a lot to say, and we kind of shut you down a little bit last time. Unmute yourself, but yeah, you were saying pretty much, we can't pull ourselves up by our bootstraps because we don't have boots. And that was, go ahead. Yeah, that was a response that I quoted from Martin Luther King when someone approached him with why don't you guys just pull yourself out by your bootstraps? And it was like, okay, we don't have any boots. So, we have some fundamental issues. When we're seeing our women, they're going to have several different institutional support systems. She's going to have TANF. She's going to have HUD. She's going to have food stamps. She's going to have, public assistance, so on and so forth. We're not going to see those open arms of support in terms of our men. So if we as a community really want our men to step up, we're going to have to get behind them.
Is that so very different from what you were saying, Dan Trez?
I just want to say that I never said anything that's diametrically opposed to anything that Crumb was saying. I didn't even say that, this is the solution that's going to fix our community. I just asked for one simple thing for brothers to step up. That's all I asked. I wasn't saying that that's going to fix all our problems, it's going to get Trump out of office, anything like that. I was just saying, that being said, when I was a young father, I remember, shout out to Askia Muhammad for this one. Shout out to that brother. And I don't know if he still works for this organization, but I know that every state has one. It's called the Fatherhood Initiative. And I know there's one in Virginia, there's one here in Ohio. And I'm actually going to go through a 15-week course with them. And pretty much what I'm gonna be doing is I'm gonna be setting up workshops, helping fathers really learn how to parent. And the Fatherhood Initiative, they do everything from, teach parenting classes, get legal services, free legal services for gentlemen that need that. And they even have a program for returning citizens. And returning citizens is the actual term for people that are coming out of jail. So, and they cover pretty much the gamut. They cover the gamut. So, and most counties actually have like a program within the county where you can actually go and take classes and things of that nature. So I know that that's always happened. And I know, again, I know that I was part of the Imani. I'm still a part of the Imani Foundation, even though I'm not there physically present. But I also help, I'm also on the African Elders Council here in Dayton, Ohio. So we try to do as much as we can when it comes to mentoring young people. And I know I spent pretty much most of my life mentoring young people on top of being an educator. So, and I'm not trying to get anybody's experience, but I've always had support. Like I've always had support, whether it's formal or informal, mostly informal, mostly from my elders in my community. A lot of it was informal, but I know, the way I was raised, I know that parenting is a communal thing. It's not something that two people do. It's not something that one person does. It's something that you do as a community. You cannot do it on your own. You cannot do it with just you and your partner. It has to be something that's community. But I just wanted to point that out. I wasn't diametrically opposed to anything Crumb was saying, because I do think there is a system that actually puts us, enslaves us. Whether mentally, physically, economically. Hardcore. I agree with that.
Good stuff. Now, you brought up the fact that it's not a, single thing or a two-parent thing. It's a village thing. It's a communal thing. And you always felt supported. So Dan Trez has always felt supported. Ed, have you always felt supported? Crumb, have you always felt supported in your fatherhood experience? And Ponda, have you always felt supported?
Let me just answer that really quickly, and I'm gonna pass the talking stick. Us as a people, that is the issue with us. We are very individual, and we do not think collectively. There were black slave masters during slavery. That doesn't mean the average slave could become a slave master. If you have a particular individual experience that has nothing to do with the collective experience of our people, sure, I may have met a great white guy, but collectively, that has nothing to do with anything in the world. We must get away from an individual aspect and operate with the understanding of the collective. You had a great experience. Fine. That means nothing. It means nothing. And in addition, that's what the beast is going to use to make an excuse. Malcolm X said the same thing. Malcolm X spoke the collective, and every time they sent somebody to attack him, it was a person who had an individual experience and tried to use the exception to negate the overall rule.
Ed, did you feel supported as a father?
I did, and I was probably support system for a lot of people, because I guess as a teacher, as a coach, I've always had this village concept, and I've raised many kids other than my own, and just off of my kids' friends. Anybody, any kid that comes in close enough that that's close to me, you know what I'm saying? Kids don't go hungry. Kids, I'm always asking the same questions. Do your homework. Have you done this? What do you need right now? What's going on? I'm always making sure that kids are good, and so I've always been that, and people have always been there for me. Like when Charmaine was going through some growing things, I'm like, okay, so those are some questions I can't answer. And I had women in my life that stepped up and said, okay, come here, baby, and handle that. So it's always been a support thing for me. It's always been that village thing for me, because we are in this, I guess maybe I've always been in a situation where whether or not it was church, whether or not it was doing, I guess, as a staff or as, a family, we're in this thing together. We're raising everybody's kids because you know what? I go through the concept that we can all win. That's the whole point, is we want all of our kids to win and be successful. We don't want to lose any kids. We don't want to, we don't want to see a kid fail.
Right. So you felt supported. Dan Trez, you said that you felt supported. Crumb, your point is interesting. You're saying that we can't use our experiences individually as exceptions when, in general, fathers are not getting the support they need to thrive. Is that your point?
Injustice anywhere means injustice everywhere. Unless we all free, ain't none of us free.
How can we get free then?
We must act as the same way the Jews did. We must act as the same way all of Europe did. Until we come together and on a united front, they will pluck us off one by one.
Wow, you're saying we need to use the European as a standard?
Absolutely. We saw where the Europeans weren't nothing as French. They weren't nothing as a German. They weren't nothing as Italian. But when they came together under the concept that we all white, the whole world shifted then.
All right, so if we're going to use that Voltron experience where we all come together and, make the mighty Voltron, how can we do that with fatherhood so that we can address some of the problems that are impacting fatherhood?
Well, actually, I can speak to that because one of the things that I find most annoying to me is that everybody, right, present-day fathers, especially fathers, young men that don't have an example or did not have a constructive example of a father present, they think, you can't talk to my kids, you can't do this, blah, blah, blah. It's a whole moment. And so if you're telling me as a member of the community, I can't speak to your kid or I can't correct your kid, then we're going to fail. Until the point where, when we grew up, you corrected any kid that was misbehaving. I correct kids on the bus. I correct kids on the subway. I'm not scared. You're not going to whoop my ass. You might think it ain't going to be no easy win. I told the kid before, you might think it's going to be an easy win, but you won't get your whole ass whooped. For real. I'm not turning in my black man card. I'm not turning in my black father's card. Hell no. I'll whoop your whole ass. You're going to do what I said. And it's not even because, and I told, until we get to the point where we can tell, we can mentor young fathers and we can say to our kids, look, I'm not correcting you because I'm trying to disrespect you. Correction is not disrespect. Correction is because I care enough to correct you in the stupidity that you're doing. So that's my job. And then until we all take that onus as a community and be like, yo, we're not going to let our kids go out here in the world acting a complete fool. I don't care who you belong to. Come here, baby. Don't do that. Real talk. Then we're going to continue to struggle until we as a collective can... Crumb is right. Until we can come together as a collective and say, look, this is what we're going to do and this is what's going to has to happen and there are no exceptions. Real talk. What happened to that standard? What happened to the standard? What were you told as a child about education? You had to be how many times better?
Oh, twice as better.
I was told 3 times. What else?
That's because your family was bougie.
Yeah, you're right.
I thought all you Hamptonians are bougie.
Yeah, that's true.
Black and bougie. That's our mascot.
Your pirate got a facelift. Don't do that.
Hey, well, okay. So number one, we must stop believing that we cannot act as fathers to other people's children. What's the second thing? What's the next thing that we can do? And what's interesting is what we're saying is what Danny was saying and what Crumb was saying. So yeah, your Danny was right. They're not opposed. There were different ways of saying the same thing. All right, so we're gonna have to act like everybody's pops. What else can we do?
I was gonna say that one thing we do need to do, and I learned this from Sekou, I learned this from Iskia, I learned it from your dad. I learned that you have to be of service to others. You really, really, really do. You really have to be of service to others. And I think Ed kind of alluded to this, and it's something that I kind of like. I saw you guys do it, and I didn't. So I kind of like had a blueprint, but it was something that happened for me organically, and that was being the service to others, being somebody's parent, being somebody's father. I know there are times when I have students that'll tell me, you're like a father to me, and I'm like, whoa, stop right there, time out. I only got 4 kids, but yes, there's some times when you have to be assertive. You have to be that, that parent. And I think probably one of the reasons one of the many reasons why we didn't homeschool was because we wanted to be that example, right? We wanted to be that person that said, hey, you know what? I'm a dad and I'm gonna look out for you. I'm gonna be your uncle, and during the summers, during graduation, I show up for graduations because, their folks weren't there. So those little things, you got to be of service to others. You have to be really willing to not just be a dad to your kids, but also, like Ed was saying, to other kids. So you have to be of service. And a lot of times that happens informally, right? And I think we need to figure out ways to do that formally, right? So when you have like the Imani Foundation and how we mentored young people, you had NROPA, which is like a national rites of passage organization.
Right.
Joining a rites of passage organization in your city. What I've learned is all major cities have a rites of passage organization. You just have to find it and sign up because they need as many of us to step up to the plate as possible. And also, when we mentor, it shouldn't just be like, middle school, high school, elementary. There'll also be men of college age because they need it probably much more than those that are in, say, for example, high school, right? They probably need that more so because they're not in a position where they're not in a situation where they can be mentored by men, particularly Black men. So we need to reach out to college-age men as well and mentor them because they're about to become fathers themselves. They're about to, start raising families, usually a couple years after they get out of college. So that we need to do that as well.
Wow. Okay. So we must be fathers/mentors to other folks' kids and young adults, and we have to be of service to others. All right. And I'm also thinking, Dan, you were saying that last time that you just wanted us to start showing up at some of the PTA meetings. And this took me back to an organization called FIT, Fathers in Training, here in Virginia Beach. It's that fatherhood initiative that you're talking about. So in 7 cities, we have one in each city. In Virginia Beach is Fathers in Training. And they have a motto of be present, be a protector, and be a provider. Be a provider, be a protector, and be present, in that order. Be a provider, be present, and be present, all right, be a provider, and be a protector, in that order. That's the order that it said. And that's kind of what you were talking about in terms of with the PTA meeting. If we can be more present, I think then we can start dealing with some of the structural inequalities and some of the other governmental problems that are preventing some of our fathers from being the fathers that they want to be. So yeah, definitely we have to be present. When they talked about, providing, they weren't necessarily saying you had to be the household provider, because if you didn't live with your child, there's someone else who's truly providing something for them, but you can provide to that provider. And it's something that you have to do. They have to be very obvious about. You have to provide to that provider. And that's what they taught with Fathers in Training. And protect, it doesn't mean that you're going to be the superhero and put on your Iron Man suit. It meant that, when they're dealing with some things, you're going to give them advice that protects them from harm. Whether they listen to that advice or not, whether you're going to get some flack because you ain't been in their lives, and now people are saying, who are you to say anything? You ain't been around. As long as you keep giving good advice that will protect them from harm, at some point they'll start listening. So the thing was, be present, be a provider, and be a protector. Crumb, you've had a really interesting fatherhood experience, right? All right. Let's talk about that, man, because your children don't live with you. So how is it a little different? Because I know that, with Eddie, his kids live with him. My kids live with me. Dan Trez, your kids live with you. What's the challenges of being a father when your children don't live with you?
Well, I think a large part of it is, the social workers. Our women have been encouraged to part ways with the men, and I think you were kind of speaking to that to a certain degree. You were defining these things. And, even though I know you speak from a practical individual point, when we're dealing with these people who are more so following the government, being a provider has nothing to do with anything except a monetary contribution. I don't care if you're the greatest dad in the world. If you don't give them what they deem righteous, then you're a deadbeat dad. And these are some of the things that a lot of our young men are going to find out early, who may be with a woman who is more so going to go with whatever dominant society says, you know. And I personally feel as if I've been a victim of that, you know. So it's definitely been a hard struggle when you're dealing with, you know, people who are going to go with the social worker, people who are going to go with the, you know, the court system. I challenged my son to do something, and he had flaked out on me, and I pushed him, you know, just like my father pushed me. And, you know, she told the cops or the police, the courts, that I was abusing him, you know. So I understand a father's plight in terms of being active, because what we're going to see is this being interpreted as toxic masculinity. What we're going to see is where your alpha males like Malcolm X are going to die, and your beta males like Al Sharpton are going to flourish.
Whoa. Oh. Yeah, I got to clap for that. Okay.
That's something right there.
Wow.
I you know, I get that. And, you know, I understand, because I see that on a regular basis. And, you know, the system is not designed for men to be successful. It's not. For as fathers, it's not. It's not designed for you to be able to. But I tell, you know, but you said the right thing. You were right on point. First of all, the ministry of presence is a powerful thing. And you know what? Be there when you can be there. I've seen kids like, so my godson, I got a godson whose father ain't nowhere to be found. I ain't seen that joker since baptism, since dedication. And guess what? But every time they have men in schools, at his school, what is he, in 3rd grade, 4th grade? I show up. And I stay as long as I can. And I follow his classes. And to the point where I know the kids in his class. And I've checked a couple of them in class. And they know when I walk in the room, or I'll just show up at his school. David, what are you doing? I told Lily Monty, I said, sweetie, Miss Destiny, I said, sweetheart, you talk too much. Why don't you let And I gave them homework. The teacher gave them homework. I said, so here's your extra assignment. Make sure it's on there. I said, you explain to your teacher what is so important that you have to talk about, that you want to interrupt her lesson. Since you know so much in the 3rd grade that you have to talk and the teacher don't get to talk. No, ma'am. But guess what? It's about showing up. And when you talk about, and we have to teach fathers how to be present. And it's not always about, don't be present for the big stuff. No, for the little stuff. So if you got a problem at school, and I'm saying this because the new position I'm taking is part of it is graduate support. And so once I transition kids to their next step, I'm also providing graduate support to students and parents, because a lot of parents, so if I'm transitioning kids to these uppity bougie, predominantly white prep schools. And so I have to be able to make sure that parents can advocate for their kids. It's not that parents don't want to advocate, they don't know how. They don't know how to walk into this situation and say, okay, so this is what my child has presented to me, and this is what I think needs to happen. And so how are we going to make this happen?
Wow.
And that's part of it, that I stay in D.C., that I stay in the city, because my last homeroom in DCPS, you know, those kids, those parents don't necessarily, I realize that in the underserved communities in our cities, it's not that parents don't want the very best for their kids, but guess what? A lot of people don't know how to advocate for their kids.
Okay, let's take that point. And look, we have 5 minutes left. So we have brothers who were in a similar situation as Crumb. So I want to start with Dan Trez. I'm going to go to Chuck, and then we'll head back to you, Crumb, man. We need to give some solutions for those brothers who are in that same situation. And I'm going to start off by saying, be present, provide, and protect. And I know it's not going to be the ultimate cure-all. It's not a panacea, but I've seen situations where brothers who are in similar situations to you, if they're present, even if they can't provide, if they're present, then things start moving. And then once they're able to provide, but the key thing is they have to be present before any of this works. Because the fathers who have the money, they throw the money at the families and they always pay child support, but they're not present, they still deadbeat dads. Dan Trez, we got brothers who are dealing with situations just like Crumb. What do you say?
Two things. First of all, number one, to the fathers, already to the fathers, two things for them. Ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask for help. You know, there's people, brothers in the community that are willing to help you. Number two, sign up for the Fatherhood Initiative. They do a lot of great. They got to do a lot of great work, and they got our people working in those positions. And the Fatherhood Initiative in Ohio, I know all the people here in my county, and they all look like us. So they're always willing to help. They're always willing to do an extra hand, formally and informally. I want to address something that Crumb said last week. That me and Rodney Sidney, who you should be having on your show, Seiko, who's a social worker, and he actually writes children's books that deals with police brutality. We always talked about how we need to see more black men in the classrooms. There is, I think the number is 79% of the teachers in the United States are white women. That's a problem. That is a big problem. And we need to get more of us in there. I know there's a money issue because being an educator doesn't pay a lot. I always tell people if you don't want to make any money, become an educator, and we need to see more brothers become educators.
Real quick, can I say that real quick though? But if they're going to have brothers in the classroom, every system claims to want brothers in the classroom, but they don't know what that entails. And if they want that on a very scripted basis, and they want to tell you how to be a black man in a classroom. Hell no. And I've fought that for years. Guess what? I've told people I'm not going to teach like a white woman. I don't. I look stupid. What you get is what you get. You get the brilliance. You get the brilliance that I possess, and you get my ability to deliver and connect with kids in a way. And so the problem isn't always having black men in. They'll get black men in the classroom, but keeping them, the retention rate is low because they can't control you. And that's scary to them. All right, well,
tag along with the conversation as well. What are some things that we could do to help brothers like Crumb? Ed?
Again, just making sure, just be that support for him. Like, yo, what you need? I mean, do you need me? Seriously, like, if your kids aren't present with you, making sure... My suggestion is, making sure that you show up for everything that is humanly possible, even if they're just giving out the perfect attendance award. I don't care if or just a pop by, just show up. Real talk. Just be there. That's step one.
Okay. We have a minute left. And Crumb, man, so now you had 3 brothers that are talking to you and they gave solutions for people in your situation. How practical? Thumbs down?
You know why they call the projects a project? Because it's a project. This system is not broken. This is the way the system operates. Until we chant down Babylon, nothing will change. We can pray, we can march, we can wish, we can try to play get-along gang, but until we break the system, the situation that we are in has been created for us. And until we remove the environment that has created our situation, we will never get out of it.
Bro, you gave me the thumbs down. I gotta give you the middle finger. This how it goes, man. I understand that we're fighting against the system, and the system is trying to make sure that we're not present. The system is trying to make sure we're not providing. The system don't want us there because we're going to protect. So we have to do exactly what the system doesn't want us to do to chant down Babylon, to bring down those chains. Yo, we got to do those things, bro. Now, I know this. As a brother who's on the struggle right now, it's hard to take the stuff that we're talking about as something that you can put in action right now. I get that. So I take your thumbs down, bro. I embrace it. Hopefully you embrace my middle finger. And look, we got about 30 seconds, man. So real quickly, Crumb, give me your socials and your movement.
I'm on Crumb TV on YouTube, Crumb TV1 on Instagram, Crumb TV1 on Twitter, Crumb TV on on Facebook, and Snatched on everywhere podcasts can be found.
All right, Dan Trez Omi, what's your movements? What are your socials?
Just go ahead and put in Dan Trez Omi in Google, and you'll find me everywhere. And Where My Killa Tape at podcast.
Stay fly, stay fly, stay fly, stay fly.
The views expressed on the Fly Guy Podcast by the guests of the Fly Guy Podcast are only the views of the guests, unless we say we agree, unless explicitly stated.
Stay fly, stay fly, stay fly, stay fly, stay fly, stay fly, stay fly.
Stay conscious, stay fly.